They don't come at you with weapons. They come with words, subtle, polished, emotionally loaded words designed to disarm you before you even realize you're under attack. Carl Jung warned that the manipulator isn't the loud one, not the villain in plain sight. It's the charming voice, the spiritual tone, the carefully chosen phrase that slips past your defenses and rewires your perception, one sentence at a time. Because language is the first weapon of psychological control. And if you don't know what to listen for, you'll find yourself apologizing when you did nothing wrong, defending yourself against invisible accusations, or bending to guilt you were never supposed to carry. These are the 7 phrases that expose someone as a manipulator, according to Jungian psychology. And the first one sounds innocent, until it's too late. The first phrase is, "You're too sensitive." This means, I want the freedom to hurt you without consequences. This is the manipulator's favorite deflection, because it flips the emotional script. You're not reacting to something cruel. No, you're overreacting. You're misinterpreting. You're the problem. Carl Jung would say this phrase is an example of emotional invalidation, used to destabilize your intuitive reaction. It teaches you to mistrust your own perception, to censor your feelings, to second-guess what your body already knows is wrong. But here's the trick. They don't say this phrase in anger. They say it with a smile, a sigh, a tone of disappointment that makes you feel ashamed just for feeling. This is not feedback. This is gaslighting, dressed in gentle concern. The second phrase is, "After everything I've done for you." This is not gratitude. This is a transactional trap. Jung taught that the manipulator often plays the role of the giver, not to love you, but to own you. This phrase is an emotional invoice. It tells you that kindness has terms, that affection has a price. So the moment you set a boundary, you're not asserting yourself. You're ungrateful. You're selfish. You're turning your back on someone who's done so much for you. But none of those gifts were freely given. They were leverage, dressed as love. And once you recognize this pattern, you'll start to feel it. That heavy, suffocating sense that every nice thing they do is just a down payment on future guilt. The third phrase, "You're the only one who understands me," sounds romantic, intimate, even flattering. But Carl Jung warned that when someone tries to isolate you emotionally, it often begins with over-identification. This phrase locks you into an exclusive emotional role. You're not just a partner or a friend. You're the only one who gets them. This means if you walk away, you've betrayed them. If you express discomfort, you're misunderstanding them. If you pull back, you're just like everyone else. It puts a crown on your head, then threatens to break it if you take it off. You become their therapist, their crutch, their emotional oxygen, and the moment you stop playing that role, they suffocate and blame you for their collapse. This isn't love. It's covert control through flattery. The fourth phrase is, "Why are you bringing up the past?" This phrase is a psychological firewall. You try to name a pattern. You bring up something hurtful. You want clarity. And instead of engaging, they escape. They minimize. They act like you're living in the past, when really, you're just trying to stop it from repeating. Jung warned that manipulators protect their ego at all costs, and confronting their own behavior threatens that ego. So they'll twist your accountability into obsession. They'll make your clarity look like grudge holding. And suddenly, you're the toxic one for daring to connect today's pain with yesterday's wounds. But here's the truth. If someone refuses to face the past, they're almost certainly planning to repeat it. The fifth phrase, "You're overthinking it," slips under the radar because it sounds logical, reasonable, even helpful. But it's not. It's a dismissal of your intuition. Carl Jung said the unconscious speaks in symbols, dreams, and patterns, so when your mind keeps returning to something, there's usually a reason. Manipulators use this phrase to pull you away from your own psychological insight, to make you feel like your questions are irrational, your doubts are dramatic. They want your silence, not your clarity. And the fastest way to silence someone? Convince them that thinking deeply is a flaw. But it's not. It's your early warning system. and they want to disable it. The final two phrases are the most dangerous, because one of them exposes the master manipulator, someone who can twist logic, facts, and even your memory into tools of control. The other reveals what Jung believed to be the core defense of the narcissistic ego, a sentence so predictable it hides in plain sight. And once you learn to spot them, you'll never hear them the same again. There's a moment in every manipulative dynamic where your gut whispers, "Something's wrong, but I can't prove it." You feel cornered, not physically, but emotionally. You try to bring something up, and suddenly you're the villain. You try to clarify the truth, and suddenly you're confused. You try to stand your ground, and somehow you're apologizing again. Carl Jung believed this wasn't just emotional confusion, it was psychic warfare. And it almost always reveals itself through language. That brings us to the sixth phrase, one of the most deceptive lines of all. "I never said that. They did say it." You remember it. You felt it sink into your chest like a blade, but now they're telling you it never happened. You're misremembering. You're confused. You're making things up. This is not miscommunication. This is gaslighting at its purest form. Your manipulator taught that the manipulator's greatest weapon is the ability to rewrite reality, not by force, but by suggestion. They don't argue the facts. They simply deny them. And when you try to hold the thread of truth, they make you feel unstable. This tactic is designed to create self-doubt. If your memory is unreliable, then so is your anger. If your perception is wrong, then so are your boundaries. And now, they've won, not by overpowering you, but by disconnecting you from your own inner compass. You'll start to notice the pattern. The story always shifts. Their words are slippery. What they say doesn't match how you feel. But every time you try to explain it, they respond with cool confidence, as if your emotional reality is just a misunderstanding. Carl Jung called this shadow projection. The manipulator refuses to face their dark side, so they push it onto you. And then they say something like the seventh phrase, "You're the toxic one." This is the ultimate reversal, the narcissist's final defense. It happens when their mask starts to crack, when they sense you're waking up, pulling away, seeing through the illusion. Instead of reflecting inward, they turn the mirror back on you, not to illuminate truth, but to weaponize blame. Suddenly, everything is your fault. Your reactions, your tone, your timing, your drama. They'll say, "You're making a big deal out of nothing. You always twist things. You're the real manipulator here." This tactic is designed to make you question your entire emotional framework, to confuse you so deeply that you give up the fight just to restore peace. But Jung warned that peace built on self-abandonment is not peace, it's compliance. And the more you comply, the more control they gain. So how do you protect yourself? By recognizing that these phrases are not random. They're not just signs of immaturity. They're tools, used strategically by people who often can't face their own inner fragmentation. Because if they had to admit they were manipulative, controlling, or abusive, they'd have to face the parts of themselves they've buried. And Jung knew, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Manipulators are not just hurting you, they're hiding from themselves. And your clarity threatens that hiding place. But here's the key. You don't win by fighting them. You don't win by arguing harder. You win by no longer participating in the script. Every time you recognize a manipulative phrase and don't take the bait, you shatter the illusion they've built. You stop defending your truth. You stop explaining your worth. You stop trying to convince someone who already decided to misunderstand you. And that moment, the moment you detach without needing to be right, is the moment you reclaim your power. When you hear phrases like, "You're too sensitive," "After everything I've done for you," or "I never said that," you're not just dealing with a toxic personality. You're dealing with a person in psychic conflict. Carl Jung taught that all manipulation begins in the unconscious. And most manipulators aren't even aware of what they're doing, because they've buried the very parts of themselves they project onto others. They lie to you because they lie to themselves. And their language exposes their internal chaos. Each manipulative phrase is a shield, not just against you, but against their own shadow. When they say you're too sensitive, beneath it is the fear, I hurt people, and I don't want to admit it. They accuse you of overreacting because your pain exposes their behavior. To avoid confronting their aggression, they turn your reaction into the problem. Jung would call this projection, the ego pushing its unacceptable traits outward. So if they feel shame for being cruel, they'll accuse you of being weak. Because in their world, pain equals powerlessness, and powerlessness must be destroyed, not empathized with. When they say, after everything I've done for you, beneath it is the belief. Love is conditional. They don't give from wholeness. They give to control. Because somewhere in their childhood, love was earned through obedience, performance, or sacrifice. Now, as adults, they reenact that contract with everyone around them. I give you affection, you owe me compliance. But this isn't generosity. It's emotional extortion. And the moment you break the contract, they frame you as the betrayer, because the truth is too painful to face. They were never loving. They were trading. When they say you're the only one who understands me, beneath it is the wound. I don't believe anyone could truly love me unless I make them responsible for my survival. It sounds like a compliment, but it's actually emotional fusion, the manipulator's way of securing attachment through obligation. If you're the only one who understands, you're now trapped in their story. If you leave, you're abandoning them. If you set boundaries, you're rejecting their deepest self. But Jung would say this isn't connection. It's enmeshment, where identity is blurred and love is used as a leash. Every manipulative phrase is a defense mechanism, a way of keeping the psyche intact by shoving the truth onto someone else. And over time, if you keep absorbing that energy, something dangerous happens. You start to internalize their shadow. You begin to question your intuition. You shrink to avoid conflict. You hesitate before speaking, not because you're wrong, but because you fear retaliation. You replay conversations in your head, obsessively trying to prove that what you felt was real. This is not weakness. This is the effect of prolonged exposure to psychological distortion. Carl Jung knew this pattern well. He called it ego possession by the shadow, when someone's unacknowledged darkness takes over and begins infecting the people closest to them. And the only way out? You stop playing the role they've cast for you. You stop being the apologizer, peacekeeper, therapist, mind reader, or emotional sponge. Because none of those roles are real. They're reflections of the manipulator's needs, not your identity. And when you drop the role, the illusion collapses. This is where things get hard. Because manipulators don't just lose control of you. They're forced to face something they've avoided their entire life. Their own powerlessness. That's when they escalate. They'll cry, rage, smear, guilt, or go silent, hoping you'll come crawling back. But you don't. Because you finally see the truth. Their power was never real. You were just never allowed to question it. Carl Jung warned, people will do anything to avoid confronting their own soul. Manipulators are master avoiders. But when you stop absorbing their darkness, when you refuse to carry their shame, when you stop translating their chaos into compassion, you don't become heartless. You become free. There's a calm that comes when you no longer flinch at their words, not because they've changed, but because you have. You hear them say, "You're overthinking it. You're the toxic one." I never said that. And instead of spiraling, you go still, silent, clear. Because once you understand the game, you stop playing. Carl Jung believed that the moment you become aware of someone's manipulation, you don't just regain your power. You dismantle the illusion they used to hold it over you. This isn't about confrontation. It's about clarity. And clarity is lethal to control. You no longer argue to prove the truth, shrink to make peace, or rewrite your story to fit their version. You simply stop engaging in the fantasy. The fantasy where they're always right, you're always misunderstood, and every hurt they cause is somehow your fault. And as that fantasy dies, something else is born. Self-trust. You start noticing the tone behind the phrase, not just the words. You notice how their compliments feel like cages, how your body tenses when they speak, how your mind goes foggy after the conversation, and how your soul feels smaller just being around them. These are not coincidences. They are clues. And Jung taught that the unconscious is always communicating, especially through discomfort. So when your body says, "This isn't right," believe it. Because a manipulator's goal isn't just to win arguments. It's to make you feel like you shouldn't even start one. And now that you've seen it, you'll never unsee it. That's the power of naming manipulation. It doesn't always destroy the relationship, but it destroys the spell. That strange, heavy fog you were living under is gone. You breathe differently. You speak differently. You set boundaries not with fire, but with ice. Calm, still, non-negotiable. And that's what the manipulator can't handle. A version of you that no longer reacts on command. They'll test you. They'll throw out the old phrases again. "Why are you being distant? Wow, you've really changed. You used to care." But this time, you don't explain yourself. You don't justify your boundary. You don't hand them your clarity in exchange for their approval. Because you finally understand, their approval was always a leash, and you just cut it. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You used to call their behavior misunderstanding. You used to call your pain overreacting. You used to call their patterns love. Now you call it what it is. Control, projection, emotional puppeteering. And with that truth in hand, you walk away, not just from them, but from the version of yourself that needed their permission to feel sane." Here's the final lesson. You don't need to expose the manipulator to others. You just need to stop being the person they can manipulate. No drama, no explosion, no proof. Just silence, boundaries, and the quiet force of self-possession. Because when you no longer explain yourself, you become unreadable, unshakable, unusable. And that, Jung would say, is the true end of manipulation. Not when they stop lying, but when you stop listening.